Right, today we are talking Wind and Truth, Brandon Sanderson. May have heard of him. So this one is actually, I don't think this is a particularly hot take or a particularly controversial take, but I do think that a lot of the narrative on Booktube about this book is just misguided, let's say. And so I just kind of want to throw my hat into the ring about this book because I think Booktube has got this wrong a little bit. So I'll start with just saying I liked this one for a Stormlight book. It was good. I liked it for a Sanderson book. I thought it was good. I thought it was one of his better books. Now I feel like there'll be pitchforks and torches thrown at me at this stage, but because just isn't the general consensus of the Booktube reviews that you see. But as we'll get into, I think they're misguided. So I thought it was good. I'd probably say it was the second best Cosmere book. Sorry, not Cosmere book, Stormlight book, with probably the first one, Way of Kings, as the best. I didn't really like the second one, apart from bits of it, which again is a slightly controversial take, but there we go. It shouldn't really be that controversial, to be honest. But anyway, so why do I think this? Well, I think that a lot of the criticisms of the books, and this is basically my central argument to this, is that a lot of the criticisms of this book are in all the books, and there seems to be this thing that people have gone like, oh, this book's terrible and all the other ones are amazing, and he's just made so many errors in this, and that makes this one really bad. And these are the things that I just think is really obviously there in the books the whole time. So I can go through examples of them. I haven't, this certainly isn't scripted, but I actually have slight notes on screen to kind of cover what people say are the common faults of this book and why those people are wrong. The first one is that it feels so. You had the Mistborn series, and that's in multiple eras, but at the moment we have two of those eras written, and so you have the Vin, era 1 with Vin and Kelsier and people like that, and then it ends, and then 300 years later there's another book with or another series of books with Wax and Wayne that is set then, right? And I think people are saying that they were expecting the end of Stormlight Arc 1 to be sort of narratively complete and resolved, pretty much like Mistborn Era 1 is. And I don't know how you would come to that conclusion, because that book is set, the Mistborn Era 1 is set, I think it's 300 years before the second book, and the whole point of Sanderson wanting to write these books is that he wanted to write them in different eras with different technology. He wanted to see magic, come from the medieval time up to, I think his initial plan was to be modern times and then space age, but he's kind of added this Western one in as well, and I think he's going to add a cyberpunk type one, so one between sort of modern day and space age. But obviously, if you're setting 300 years between the books, you can have a narratively complete story. This one is, I think Era 2 is 15 years after Era 1, something like that. So obviously it's a setup book. Obviously there's going to be a lot of things in Era 1 that aren't resolved until Era 2. It seems like a really weird criticism that that things are left incomplete, or that narrative threads didn't go anywhere, or that the ending wasn't fully satisfactory. Of course that's going to be the case, because we're 15 years before the second era, which is obviously going to be the conclusion. So that one is a particularly odd criticism to me. I think the other criticism is that this book felt really long and padded. What were you expecting with the other books? You think that those ones necessarily needed 1,400 pages, and and those 1400 pages didn't always take you places. Like this is kind of the point of this series, is that you get into that world and you get immersed into that world, and you can take a long time with the characters. They're obviously meant to be reread. So like again, this just seems an odd criticism. This is like, I think this is the main problem with the Stormlight books, like the whole time, is that he's trying to make them this opus and having this like compelling, very well thought through world with a huge amount of world building that you can dive into if you want to, multiple races and how the world has come into place and all of that. Like obviously these books are going to be long and too long. Like I really think you're going to struggle to make a compelling argument that books need to be 1500 pages long. Like that is to some extent feel slow at times and feel a bit meandering at times. That's kind of the point of a 1500 page book, right? So again, like you could argue that the pacing's worse. I guess you could argue that it meanders more, that it's more waffly, fine, but like this is probably only a little bit more meandering and waffly than all the other books, and this is kind of the point. Is I think what's happened is with the criticisms on this book, like they're only slightly worse than the other books, and so they're maybe 5% worse in these areas. It's 5% more meandering. It's 5% worse written. The humour's 5% worse. But like that's kind of exposed this facade on what the books were, and now people are kind of criticising the whole thing and saying, well, like they've sort of noticed all of these faults that were already there in all the other books, but maybe not quite as prevalent, and so that they're kind of seeing the cracks in these books. Hopefully I'm explaining that right. Criticism is that like it's not very funny, and some of the jokes don't land. And again, I don't know what books people have been reading before, but he's not funny. Like he's never been that funny. So Sanderson, he has these real strengths and weaknesses about him, right? And he, like the things he does well, he very consistently does well. You kind of know what you can expect in a Sanderson book. It's going to have a very compelling page-turning ending. That the world building is going to be good and very thought through. The magic system is going to be interesting and thought-provoking, and it's going to have limitations, and there's going to be things that you don't know about it. It's probably going to have a twist ending of some description. Things aren't always what they seem, but that he's going to have signposted those things well, so when you reread it, or even like the first time you read it, you think, oh, I should have seen this coming. He does all that in this book very well in a number of ways. I didn't think the ending was amazing. I thought it was more predictable than most of them, but I think people have had a lot of time to think about these books. There's only so much signposting you can do. The downside to signposting is people are going to figure out what's going on, right? But he does all that really well, and that's why I think this book is one of the better ones, because I think the ending, is good in a lot of ways, and there's kind of twists and turns, and it's interesting to read. All the stuff he's not good at that is being criticised now, he's never been good at. He's never been good at these things. He's never been funny. He's never been good at, and I'll come to this in a second, but he's never been good at like dealing with complex commentary on the human condition. He's never been good at mental health or portraying that particularly well. I'm not saying he's terrible at these things, but he's not great at them. Maybe let's go, I think, so let's go, so the mental health stuff, right? Kaladin as a therapist, it felt contrived. It obviously felt contrived, sort of pointless, but you guys have read Rhythm of War, right? You have read Oathbringer. He goes through basically the same arc over and over again he starts off depressed, and then he kind of slowly realises and battles against that, and in the end, comes good and overcomes that and does something wonderful. And that, like, he's just going through the same arc over and over again with that, and all of that is in some ways a real portrayal of depression. And I'm certainly not an expert in that field, but it is a pretty contrived form of how mental health works, and that's fine. Like, that's not a problem, but it's just odd to only critique this in the 5th book and not in the first 4, where, like, I think you could validly draw the same arguments and the same comparisons in those first 4 books. There's this kind of talk about modernisation of the language, so like the word therapy. That one I didn't notice, to be honest, but if you felt that, fair enough. To me, he's not the best prose stylist, and so sometimes things feel a bit clunky. Like the trying to portray Shallan as like a quick-tongued, witty girl in the first, I think it's in Way of Kings, was pretty embarrassing. Like the dialogue was pretty contrived and pretty awful, and really felt like someone was trying to be funny and clever when they couldn't really put it off. And oddly enough, with wit, I think he does that quite well. But he says he puts so much effort into wit to get that right. But for Shallan, for like this kind of clunky, slightly trying to modernise the language and stuff, I think you can say that that's in the first 4 books as well as the 5th. Although I'm not as beholden to that argument. I'm not as beholden to that criticism. Is that it? I think that's it. Like the basic point I'm trying to make is that what Sanderson does well, he does very well in the 5th book. And if you like the things that make people want to read Sanderson, which I think almost unequivocally are world building, plot, like signposting of the plot, interesting magic system, all of that he's really good at. And I liked Seth as a character. I thought he's good. I mean, he's basically he's lawful neutral. He's just that character. He's a lawful neutral monk. That is Seth, and that's fine, right? But the Adeline stuff was like peak Sanderson. It was, I think, as good as anything else. And I think what people have got wrong about this is that they see this as the pinnacle of the series. They see this as like the final arc, or the final book in this arc, and there's going to be this complete conclusion like there was in the first era of Mistborn. And I just think your expectations, if those were your expectations, no offense, love you very much, but they're wrong, right? Obviously, if the next book is going to be 15 years later, a lot of that isn't going to be resolved. And to make that feel earned, to make the next 5 books, the next, what's that, like 7,500 pages worthwhile, there's going to need to be, a not completely satisfying conclusion. Because, what would you do? Like, if, let's say, everything was completely satisfied in the end of book 1, in the end of era 1, like, what's the payoff for era 2 going to be? You're just, like, people would just be saying, well, like, he's just made up a new villain, and that's just the start of era 2, and it only happened 15 years later, and it doesn't make sense. So, of course, it's not going to end fully, and I think he's set it up well. I think we kind of need to trust him a bit more with his plotting, and I think people are just forgetting how many books are left to go before we can expect a proper conclusion. So hopefully this all makes sense. Hopefully, I don't lose subscribers over this, but if I lost 3% of my subscribers over this, it wouldn't it wouldn't nudge the dial that much. So yeah, interested in hearing your thoughts. Hopefully, happy to talk about this. I think I kind of wish I'd scripted this a little bit more, because I would be interested. Hopefully I made my points clear, but if I didn't, please let me know in the comments and I can come back to them. And I'm not completely beholden to this opinion. I'm very happy to hear people change my mind. It's just my opinion, obviously, at the end of the day. Did I just say it's just my opinion at the end of the day? It's like the ultimate cliche. But I said it, and I'm going to keep it in. But yeah, please let me know your thoughts. I'm really interested to hear, especially if you disagree with me. Thanks.